Hey everyone, and welcome to GTM and AI Operators show. This is Akash, and this is my continuation of honest attempts to bring real operators from the ecosystem and discuss in length about the topics that we are dealing on a day-to-day basis, how AI is reshaping GTM across all spectrums of it, real stories, real meets, not for the algorithms. So thank you everyone for joining and welcome to the show. Today I have with me Kushagra Tiwari, fondly we call him KT. KT has asked me to give him a very humble introduction, but KT is one of, I would say, the best GTM engineer in ecosystem people operator, a true operator right now in India, in the Asia Pacific and globally. KT, I may have built a little bit highly than you asked, but why don't you just go ahead and introduce yourself?
Of course, thanks a lot for that, Akash. So, like you said, I'm a GTM engineer at Starbridge. Before that, I ran my agency for 2 years, which was a GTM engineering focused agency. Before that, I was a product manager. That's what I identify more often than not before being a GTM engineer.
Is being very honest, he slightly missed out a very important part about Clay World Championship. Do you want to talk about it or should I?
Yeah, Clay Championship, first Clay Cup, as
Okay.
they call it. And I ended up participating in that, ended up making it to the semifinals. That was an
Okay.
interesting experience because it accelerated just like the competitive part of it. And the role itself was fairly new back then. So it was a fun experience.
This was
In 25.
25. So last year, while
Last
still not the big cloud era.
code had not picked up back then.
Yeah.
And in the GTM space, Clay was the only sole orchestrator that
Yes. Yeah. All our orchestrations was in Clay.
Right.
So KT is Clay champion top 4 globally.
Top 4 semi-finalists in Clay Cup. Yeah.
Again, KT is being humble. KT, you started off as a lawyer, then you were the founding product manager of SpotDraft, which is a legal tech company right out of college. Now you are a principal GTM engineer at Starbridge, which is one of the hottest companies in the world right now. How does a lawyer become a GTM engineer without even learning to code? And my guess is you didn't code.
Yeah, I had no technical experience when I joined SpotDraft and also did not know actually what a product manager is. So luckily enough, I only knew that I wanted to work at a startup when I joined SpotDraft, and I did not want to do law as such. But when Rohit, who was the chief product officer, he joined, he coaxed me into trying a product, and then I ended up falling in love with that. So through that, I gained most of my technical experience because what that role required me to do was just stick with engineering day in, day out and read API documentations because you had to know like what you're going to build. So that exposure, the conversations with engineers, building product actually gave me almost a segue into this role, build up my technical understanding. I already knew what APIs are, what webhooks are, a lot of things that I use now in my role. So I would give credit to my product manager role and background for my technical understanding.
Like if I were to like poke a little bit, law, product, go to market, these are very different pieces. Like from the outside, these are like full-fledged different careers. Obviously, there's academics for all three of them. What is that one thing that has actually connected them for you? Because you have done all.
That's an interesting question. I would say that for me, I don't think so that it's like any linear connection amongst all of these three roles, like you said. For me, for most part, I've not constrained myself with a title or a role. Even though I'm a GTM engineer, I would like to think that it's almost like a builder kind of role, right?
Yeah.
If you have to like box it in a persona, like product manager and GTM engineer are like very closely related, I would say, because even GTM engineers, when they're building their motion, it's almost like they're building mini apps, right? It's almost come to that.
Yeah.
So the common underlying factor I would say is the ability to self-learn. Even in law, each case that you work on, it's a lot of research. It's a lot of self-learning to prep for it, or even a contract to understand what the deal is about, why this contract is structured this way. So that self-learning was like always there in all of these three roles, even in the product manager role. But I was always closer to being a generalist than a specialist because I did not want to fixate on one particular role. I did not think of like going ahead with one single role, building my specialization. So there's just that growth mindset and like being a generalist, being able to operate in multiple different cross-functional areas and the self-learning, I would say those would be the three connecting dots.
So I'd like to touch upon two parts, which I think I could really relate. The first is something that you said, which I actually hadn't thought about, is how GTM engineering and product management are very similar because product managers and GTM engineers both do not actually code, but they build systems. And I think your case, it would be more to do with AI. And in that case, it was more to do with engineers. This is a very interesting analogy because you're actually architecting systems and products end to end. I think the second part, I think, is the generalist part. I personally, if I would say I am a generalist and I'm a marketeer who has some experience of using GTM systems, and every now and then I call you to understand how these work. But I think the generalist part of it is much clear. I really not thought, and thank you for that.
Just on your point of how product manager and GTM engineering role overlaps, I'll give you an example. So what happened was this by somebody else. They had used Lovable for one of their campaigns, and using Lovable, what they did was created mini apps. So they actually ended up having, I forget like who exactly that person was, one of the GTM engineers, ended up getting access to Lovable's internal APIs.
Okay.
So traditionally people would basically open up Lovable and build apps there.
Yeah.
So they ended up getting access to the API and then using Clay, I think that's what they were using, ended up personalizing apps for all of their prospects.
Okay.
So that kind of entire setup is almost very close to you thinking about all of the different workflows, right? Like you have to think about like, oh, this prospect lands on this app, what will their interaction be? So I feel like all of these builder roles are actually in some ways converging, is what I think.
Yeah.
So either it is like a product manager role, GTM engineer role, you're owning a lot of the surface area of your work. And if you're owning a lot of surface area, by default, you're building a lot.
Yes.
So that way there is like a lot of overlap, and I feel actually great coming from a product background into GTM engineering because that has facilitated me in a ways that I can clearly see.
Which is more to do with in terms of thinking of systems and architecture and like having that zoned out picture and then the to that execution level.
Exactly. Like you have to know like, okay, this endpoint, because this rate limit will happen this way. This is how it will impact the entire use case. At the same time, you have to zoom out and see like, okay, what is the end result going to be, right? So exactly. I mean, you're spot on with that.
Yeah, no, now I understand in the way. And just to add maybe another 30 seconds on it, I think the generalist track is one because obviously you don't have an affinity or like you don't have that ego of a tag or a role, I think, which is obviously good. But I think there's more value from thinking from a product systems and product design perspective, which helps in orchestration at a very large scale. Because as generalist, I do not have that honest thinking from a systems perspective. So I think linearly. While in a product perspective, you think more like you zoom out, zoom in, feature level, customer level. But as a generalist, we just think of like multiple things. I think there is value to both, but I think for you, you have the best of both worlds. And I think that's what is reflecting in the work that you are doing.
A lot of marketing people, like even you, I would say like fit into that, like a segment were best positioned to take advantage of this new change and wave that has come. Right? So I can talk about like more how being a generalist actually helps. Like,
we'll definitely talk about this. While we are still on the career trajectory in the past, there is something that a lot of people, including me, are going to try and are trying, which is newsletters. SpotDraft, you had Micus AI, which was a legal newsletter in 2023. I think 2023 was not the newsletter era. We had the newsletter era in the 2010s, which towards the second half where we had a lot of newsletters. Obviously, Lenny was the front runner, visionary for that, tech newsletters. And then I thought newsletters just went down. And then now again, newsletters are back. But you had a newsletter at a very unique time, 2023. What was that early signal? Because now it's become a wave again. Everyone wants to have newsletters again. But newsletters in 2023, just share some light on that.
Sure. I would like to think less of it from a newsletter perspective, but more from like an initiative that I was interested in doing at that point of time. I just left my job at SpotDraft and I wanted to be closer to the AI space.
Okay.
And because all of my network on LinkedIn, because of my legal background, as I was working in a legal tech company for 5 years, a lot of lawyers. So I was thinking, what value can I add in terms of either publishing my work or just writing, right? So in that sense, I felt closer to start writing about legal tech and then how AI is impacting that entire space. So I started, that was an area of interest and I wanted to publicize my work a lot more after leaving my job. So that was one of the first places which makes sense to start off at. But what turned out to be interesting is I was just writing it from a perspective of publishing my work, but it ended up gaining like 800 plus subscribers. That way LinkedIn is pretty good, I think.
I think which is true now. People overcomplicate distribution. I think it's much simpler. If you do good work and you use a decent platform, whatever it is, pick LinkedIn, Twitter, Substack, Medium, whatever. If you do good work and your audience is present overall, I think quality attracts distribution automatically. Something that I have realized, it's like people just try to hack distribution too fast, too early. Even if you do it, it just then falls down very fast, very soon. Like you, after SpotDraft, you built RevenueGenie, and that's I think 2024, and you ran it through the entire of 2025. RevenueGenie, if I'm correct, and I know your co-founder Vikrant very well, is a outbound first GTM engineering go-to-market, but however would you define it, with Clay at the center, which I don't think a lot of companies were doing back then. Like obviously some AI first companies had a GTM orchestration at their end, but from an agency perspective, you were doing this. Like what did you actually see across your client book, which I think was both Indian and global. And what did you see from an agency lens, which from an in-house lens, maybe our RevOps people, which we used to call them back then, which they were not seeing?
Right. I feel like one thing that is of benefit working in an agency is just the kind of exposure that you get to different offers that a client might have, different audience, different ICP, different channels even, right? Because it's not like the same messaging can work from one client to another.
Yeah.
People like to have templates to work with. I almost think of them like as frameworks, right? Like a template of an alien that you can reuse across clients probably is like a framework that you should start off from.
Yeah.
So just working with multiple clients tells you like, okay, how you have to tweak certain things to arrive at like the results that you want to. And that tweaking and experimentation, building that muscle is really helpful. Because if you're working in-house, you're only looking at one offer, one product, one kind of an audience. And even though you end up hitting like a blocker, if your work had exposure to multiple other scenarios, you just have multiple tools to work with. So you know, like, okay, maybe this is not the framework to work with. You try out another framework. So this role especially is a lot about experimentation to crack, and especially like outbound the speed that it is moving. Like everything changes. The deliverability will change, copy will change. So experimenting and building that muscle comes in really handy in an agency setting.
I could relate to that. Obviously, I'm not an agency, I'm a fractional, but like exposure to 5 different clients now for different geographies, different ICPs, different markets. Actually, I first thought I had it because I was trying the same template everywhere. It did not work. Then eventually to a point, I rewrote all email templates for all the clients. But in my mind, the framework was set. Like for the ones who could enjoy it, it's a very nice experience that you get exposure. Because after a point, it's in GTM, you come to a fatigue with the same audience, same people. For the industries that I have worked, the word, like I know the biography of each and every enterprise buyer, like what they know, what they like, what their journey has been. So I think right now I'm enjoying it. It's nice. It's something that I don't think in-house can do. But if I can just ask a very impromptu question. You have been in-house, you have been agency, been in-house again. But just touching upon, I have been like in-house. I built my career with job titles and designations and team and a very good resume on that. There's still some taboo associated of going freelance and being agency, but there's a lot of freedom, even if it is for a year and a half. There's still that freedom that everyone should enjoy. I think doing freelancing or going solo or whatever way agency. India is a different ecosystem. There are a lot of people like us, junior to us, senior to us, who might be open to like giving a year of their life, having this experience. If you were to say something to them, what would you say?
Just so that I understand the question better, it's about like how agencies have a bad rep.
Agencies have a bad rep, and it's for very different reasons. Obviously, now outcome-based companies have a very good rep, but just as simple, if someone is not happy at their in-house setup and they just want to try going fractional for a while just to get a breath of air, not something permanent, what would you say to them that maybe you did that would just help them take the leap of faith?
Yeah, I would say like almost like the barrier to trying this out is the starting point being too intimidating. Right? Like you would think that you have to probably get into a setup very similar to your current in-house setup, but that's not true. Like probably what you can get in terms of an engagement is something as simple as like running a campaign. I would say like basically define the starting point to be so simple that you can easily do it. And that still adds value. Right? I would say that there's so many of those smaller starting points that you can still take those and add value to your like whatever prospect or clients. An example, if it is like an event campaign, right? You don't need to like get into a situation as a fractional owner to basically build their entire outbound motion. What you can start off with, like, why don't I help you out with this new event motion? That makes it much more easier. You can probably try it out while being an in-house role. And then as long as you deliver the result, it automatically becomes really addictive, right? Because then you have a taste of that momentum and then you just want to keep doing it.
I think as high performing in-house people, we just try to perfect things too much from the beginning, which maybe it doesn't need to be, and it doesn't need to be perfect. So a lot of my clients that I begin with, I'm not with them because after a point where I realize that we are not the best fit. They are really good people I know, and we have a very mutual. I'm happy to help them, but may not be the perfect clients for that. I think we just try to make things as perfect, as structured as we were in a house setup with budgets, this, that, role, money. Maybe it doesn't need to be, and over the course of time, you just figure it out. Yeah, I think I just saw it somewhere. You ran a very interesting campaign for SaaStr. You reached out to 100 odd people, got 20 meetings, which is 20% positive PRR, which is very real. What made it work? Because everyone right now is struggling, and like just to get some exposure on a good example of a good campaign is how I would look at it.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that event campaigns are one of the best performing ones right now, just because I feel like what has happened is people have access to this new tech, right, which can amplify everything that you do. But that also means like everything is becoming saturated. Like even email, for example, just because you can do it using AI, you're blasting people with the same email, right?
Yeah.
So it seems like people are actually much more now open to talking to a human either on the phone. So calling is working really well. And events work really well. So if you basically amplify that part of the process through whatever new tech you're using, then that works out well. So that's what happened with SaaStr, in my opinion, that people are already going to an event. It's a fairly large event. They've invested a lot of money because they're going to stay there for a couple of days. They've booked hotels. They probably have a booth. And booths in SaaStr are like inbound and one of these. I mean, you know how much that costs. So if you've invested that much, but what you're doing on the ground is still talking to people who are not relevant to you, wouldn't you like to basically not do that? Wouldn't you like to talk to only people while you're there who are in your ICP? Right. So that's a no-brainer almost. Like, since you have invested, why don't you get more ROI out of it? So this particular client that we ran the campaign for in SaaStr was actually selling a de-anonymization software. So our way of basically narrowing down in terms of their ICP that they could go and talk to, what we did was basically scrape posts of people talking about that I'm going to be there. Again, people talk about intent, right? Intent signals. If you had to think about intent signals, I would always think of it in spectrum, right? Like not all intent signals are equal and not all intent signals tell you that, okay, somebody is ready to buy. It's over here somewhere, right? Like, so website visitor probably like somewhere in the middle. Somebody basically, I don't know, a review on G2, maybe somewhere in the spectrum, but people telling on that post that they're going to attend really high intent, right? They're going to be there. They want to meet people. How much for better intent can you get? So if you build your list around this intent of people who want to meet other people, then you can just reach out to them with a very simple formal message, and that ends up working out really well.
I think in my last company, Meet at X, we used X could be anything, was always like a very, very high performing campaign. I was talking to Mason, who runs an ABM agency in the US, is like, he has a very simple example. It's same at SaaStr as well. But for me, like a lot of my ICPs are tech companies. So like your Databricks summit, like there is Black Hat coming, which is a security summit. These summits just are like gold mine. Like even if you pick companies who are sponsors, and like it's like, I think the best ROI campaign, you buy a exhibitor pass, which gives you access to trade just the exhibition area. Hardly it's like $999. And then you have like 400 sponsors easily, like Black Hat and some 500 security companies. Never in like your dreams, if you're a startup selling to a security company, you're going to get 600 people in one physical location. Like as simple as that. You may not meet the right buyer, but you will meet their head of sales. You will meet their account executive. Some of them you will bond with, and maybe they would be open to get introduced you to the right person. SaaStr is like a perfect example for MarTech because the head of marketings are going to be there. It's easier. But even from a tech perspective, what I've seen is like maybe you'll meet the people at the booth are usually sales partnerships and AEs. You meet some of them. You get to know. By chance, your buyer is also in the same area. The perfect combination if you're selling to a MarTech company, because most booths, most sponsors are attended by GTM people. If you're selling to a GTM first company, booths become like amazing places. It's even better, but you still get an access to the company. You still get to understand people are getting fired, people getting hired. You build relations with people just because you follow the same football club and all. I think that's so much valuable because no one is going to say no to a 5-minute conversation. Or you just happen to be at their booth for whatever reason and they will just remember. I just wish more companies could realize this much faster. So just like, don't sponsor a conference, just year one. There's so much on Luma already. Go and attend all these, whatever is there. You'll have enough ROI from just one event. And if not ROI, you would have met so many people that you have now added on LinkedIn. And the next time you're making a post on LinkedIn, they're going to like it because now there's a personal connection on the table, which is not going to get shown to their network. So I just think people just think too short term. And I've seen this enough with founders, just people just think too short term, like, hey, we invested X, 30 day, 90 day, 120 day, what is my ROI? The ROI is a lot more significant because in no other way you would have actually met these people face to face at all. Always sponsor events, never ever sponsor a conference in your year one. Is what my understanding is. Go get a lay of the land, get your sense, you will get attention of what session, what time, what physical location, what tower, playground, whatever. You get that sense always. That's what I have seen really work in my. Sorry for going on that digression. It's just something that I am also really passionate about, and it always works out for me.
100%. I mean, I feel like people think that the work is basically meeting somebody.
Yeah.
The work is after that.
Yeah.
Like you build that relationship, like you're saying, like as long as you have your foot in the door,
Yeah.
then you can build on top of it. Even if that is not your ICP and basically an influencer decision making, at least now you have an end to a personal connection.
If a head of sales makes an introduction to anyone in the company, you're not gonna just like ignore that email. Honestly, you will at least have that like courtesy of addressing what that email is, and obviously you have something relevant for them. Your intent signal shows that there is something valuable. Anyways, if I have to get to working with clients is fun. What did clients think when you pitched or when you worked with them and you talked about GTM automation and outbound? And what was their version of what you were going to deliver and what you actually did? Like just a very, very simple question. Like,
expectation setting is a big thing, right? Because they have a different idea, especially like if you're running a GTM engineering agency. It's still closer and easier to pigeonhole it in saying like it's a lead gen agency. And if you have an idea of like what a lead gen agency does, you have probably like hired somebody in the past who was just booking meetings and basically like that's what you pay them for. But a lot of those scenarios, especially like now there is like a bifurcation of where does that client lie in the PMF situation. If you're pre-PMF, then any which way outbound is harder to crack because you are figuring out who your ICP is.
Correct.
So the thing is to have the right expectation that what we're going to do is actually run experiments. You have not cracked this channel, this is not working right now. We're going to try out things. And the outcome in a lot of cases is just learning that this particular experiment does not work. But at least you ended up running that experiment, right? Like next thing that you're going to invest your time in, you don't have to keep worrying about this. At least you have answers. So that expectation setting actually is really important, and people and clients who are pre-PMF have a different idea in terms of what they want to achieve out of it. So that has to be done is what I realized very soon. Otherwise, like there's no point. Some of the companies I ended up disqualifying just because of expectations not matching in terms of what this is supposed to do. So yeah, I mean,
I have also realized that as I was also maturing from a fractional capacity, I actually used this word in the closure meeting. Someone just asked, so by when will we see results? Somehow I maybe like I was just being honest that these were my words. I do not have a magic wand here. What is written in this scope of work, if you do it, it's a journey. I also don't know at what point what will happen. If you are up for it in your mind to test out these channels, whatever they may be, events, email marketing, calling, whatever they may, or just the infrastructure, these are the learnings that I can guarantee you that you can take in-house and do whatever you want with them so that you don't spend this money. What I can guarantee you is that the experiments will be over soon conclusively, whether or not they are successful. This is what I said, and that actually made sense. I was just telling you that we did 3 months of it and email is not working and now we're trying something else. Because that was my recommendation. It's not that, hey, don't write off email as a channel. At the stage that you are, maybe we need to do more with creating your brand at this point. And then again, email will work because we are seeing enough engagement data, but just not conversion data from emails. Enough website visits, enough email opens, enough clicks, enough engagement, but not just enough trust for them to like come and book a meeting with you right away. Right. So I think I learned it the hard way. How long was it for you to come to this maturity of expectation setting in your agency?
I think luckily enough, what happened was there was a lot of initial traction even when I started my agency, right? Just because of the interest in the space. So a lot of conversations in a initial, I would say like 1 to 3 months, this ended up becoming really clear that this is an important part to clarify in terms of what you will end up getting and then what you can do with it. So sometimes people operate in different models, even positive responses. That's like a longer conversation that even if you deliver positive responses, what has to be done after that, right? So those nuances you have to basically discuss upfront to set the ground for your success.
Yeah, Katie, you were in-house, you ran an agency, and right now you are in-house at one of the better companies out there. It's my observation that early adopters are always agencies. That has always been the case. But I think tech has been democratized, AI has been democratized, and legacy organizations like the Oracles and that size, legacy organizations are usually like the laggards who adopt a new technology towards the end of the spectrum. In today's world, specifically to being AI native GTM, agencies will continue to be early adopters, but specifically to the legacy organizations, how do you think their adoption to AI being AI native?
Right. I think for AI native companies, this is like a slightly different scenario and also like depends on what you're getting help for in terms of an agency engagement. So the entire space is changing because of it. So are the motions. Even if you're an AI native company, you're fixated on building your product and your side of things. But what about the different channels and how they're evolving? Like even something as simple as AI SEO, or GEO, AEO. There's so many changes that happening in real time. Like you see a lot of articles that are getting quoted out because of Reddit. Now that's one thing, right? And that's why probably like Google and Reddit have an engagement now. So that entire data sharing, like how it gets quoted is one thing. Now, how will it evolve downstream? Now people are spinning up pages to build their authority just so that they can get quoted. Similarly, like for outbound side of things, now you could orchestrate the entire thing in one singular place using these new age orchestrators like Claude Code or Play for that matter. But earlier it was like MRE teams and different SDR, LDR, and all of these were basically disjunct. Right?
Yeah.
So because everything is evolving so rapidly across these motions and channels, it's difficult for one singular person to stay on top of it all. So how it usually works is people whose core side of the business is essentially just focusing on these channels and work, they know the best about it. Right? That's where agencies come in and have traditionally also come in. And I feel that that still is true. But what I have seen, how it is playing out, that people want to build this in-house eventually. So I feel like the motion almost becomes that you get initial help from agencies to set this entire thing up, but then you can end up owning it because people want to own it in-house eventually. It's also easier to own once that motion is working as delivering results. The amount of effort that you have to put into it is actually in a long enough horizon, not that much, and you should ideally own it in-house. But as a starting point, getting up to speed with all of the changes, it's easier to rely upon an agency to do that.
Also, I think it's what would the opportunity cost? Like, if you want to build an AI native GTM team, you are hiring people full time. They need in their head, they need to have clear KPIs, clear performance metrics, and all of that. If you still don't know, because the world is so fluid right now, how are you going to appraise a person, fire a person 6 months down the line based on that success? So I think having someone full time is a difficult play right now because it's so fluid. Like you ask them and say that, hey, do I want to use this? But what does success look like? Because you yourself do not know, and the ecosystem that itself do not know. And I have some sympathy with in-house marketeers where their CEOs just keep forwarding them that Claude is running the entire motion, and why can't you?
Right.
I have a lot of sympathy, and I have started using this term, which is actually true. Don't believe everything you see on LinkedIn.
That's true. But I do feel like, I mean, a lot of GTM engineering thing, I strongly believe that eventually it should reside in-house.
Yes.
But it is still difficult because of just like demand supply of talent
Yeah.
to find that in-house person.
Yeah.
It makes sense like you hire an agency, an external GTM engineer, set that up,
Yeah.
and then probably train somebody internal to be that.
You wound down the agency and went in-house as principal GTM engineer at Starbridge. And this was early this year. What was the thought process on like moving on from an agency to in-house, given that now we have established that the talent and the exposure is more towards an agency setup?
Right. I was actually enjoying quite a lot of the work on the agency front, but I wanted to do a couple of things that were more interesting to me, even more interesting than the agency. Right? The two big things or factors were essentially working on the entire motion on a much deeper level. So if you're an outbound agency or GTM engineering agency, your handoff is usually on a positive reply level or a meeting book level.
Yeah.
But what happens to the entire client or prospect after that? You don't have as much of a say in it, or you are not as involved in it.
Yeah.
I wanted to be even more involved in terms of contributing to the outcomes, even from the start of like even sending out an email, them being a prospect, to them becoming a customer or even beyond. Right? So I wanted to be closer to that part and build for it. And that exposure I was lacking. And the other big motivator was essentially having the opportunity to learn, because running my own agency, I was getting a lot more involved in the operation side of things, which was taking away from the time to stay on top of AI related stuff, which is the first thing that got me into this.
Yes.
So that I really enjoyed. So these were the two big factors for me to like move into an in-house.
I understand. Some days even I have to just downtime and read. And then podcasts are a lot of things. Like I learned a lot of interesting things about Instantly, which I now going to implement. Because mostly it's all about execution, delivery. Yeah. What's the difference now that you're in-house? How do the two seats look? And what are exactly those things like outside of what you just said that was still lacking? Like now you have spent another good 6 months.
Right. Actually, I'm quite happy with my current role. And in both of those situations that I talked about, right, I got an opportunity to build systems at a scale that the agency setting would not have allowed me. So I'm operating and like sending emails or building infra at a scale that one agency, it would not have been possible. And second is like just it being like a teamwork situation. Right? I'm working with the engineering team in terms of building these motions, like back very similar to the product, a manager role. I'm working with our SDRs our A's, our RevOps team, marketing team, this entire thing becoming more like a team game versus when you're outside an agency or a fractional operator, what happens is it's difficult for you to ask things. Like, why don't you involve me more? Why don't you tell me this? It's always an ask. Whereas this becomes like a facilitation. Everybody is there to help. So that's like a great change for me.
Just as a joke, I think it should be called GTM product manager, not GTM engineer. So coming on your household, Starbridge sells GTM intelligence for public sector deals. You are now doing GTM engineering inside a company whose product is GTM, which is a very interesting lane. Like, it's a very interesting place to be. How it is like building a GTM motion for a company that's a GTM product or a GTM thing itself. Like, how is it?
It's great actually. Just because, so we were talking about earlier how if you move from an agency into an in-house role, you become only aware of one kind of an offer and one kind of a company, one kind of a product. But working in a GTM product itself, like, you might not be as involved, but you're seeing like how other people are using your product for their own GTM motion. Right? So that way, you're always seeing like both sides of the things. So that's really interesting. At the same time, offer for GTM products, I feel like are great. I always had an idea of what kind of company, if I were to move in-house, I wanted to work at. Starbridge is exactly that kind of company just because of how great their offer is. And also because the product gives you so much.
I think at all points, there is a lot of hype and there's a lot of reality. You were part of the substance in the hype. You are now implementing stuff at scale at a GTM first AI native company. Some of the myths that you really like to break, maybe myths of 2025 or myths of 2026, what people really don't understand.
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of hype around now using AI. Let's talk about just Outbound, for example, as an example. Right? Like how to use AI. There's a lot of hype that you can do all of these personalization. You saw AI SDR, like so many AI SDR companies back in the but a lot of them have not at least like sustained that amount of interest or are not delivered those results. But that does not mean now people conflate things. Like people are on either end of the situation, as is the case like always. So they will either not believe in AI just because like they will have a bad experience, a bad taste in the mouth using something like an AI SDR, or they will be basically that I will let my entire GTM motion run using an agent and AI and do that. So in both of those situations, the thing is that you will more likely than not end up being incorrect. So because you're very biased towards one situation, whereas like truth is somewhere in the middle, even though you can use AI to do like a lot of copywriting or a lot of segmentation and even like facilitate your GT motion, but you have to still like basically be on top of it, at least now. But I've seen that reduce more and more over a time frame. So initially when you had that chat GPT UI, a single chat window, right? Like you will work to create a piece of work. You'll work in chat and basically what you get is like a piece of work that you can take away from that chat and use somewhere else. But now with all of these general purpose coding agents like Claude Code, Codex, whatever it might be, now some of that work actually you can offload. But also now it is even more important for you to have judgment, because if you're offloading the work and you don't know like what you're offloading, then something is going to happen. There's a lot of volume that people see using AI, but that volume at the end of the day has to result into something. Is that you should not lose sight of the end goal and know that what you're trying to do. As long as you have that judgment in place, AI can either be basically like just doubling your good output or doubling your bad.
I'll just put this context. I actually update my writer skill every 2 weeks. Like I actually go and update. I take an audit of all my LinkedIn posts. I see the world and I rewrite a lot of those posts, because in 2 weeks as a person, I have matured. The ecosystem has matured. A lot of things have changed. Every 2 weeks, I actually go and update my that skill.md for my LinkedIn writer skill. At one point, it was going like this, but if I do not do it, will fall that fast, because it has its own biases. The ecosystem evolves. Like it's much more mature than just having M dashes. Now humans are smart enough to detect what is AI. Like I have now 3 writer skills and I use them in conjunction, because one has been trained from like 6 months of data, one only has 3 weeks of data, and one has 3 months of data of LinkedIn data. So I really understand. Maybe I'm not able to translate what it means, but that part is like SDR efficiency is very high because of AI. I was talking to Rahul about it. Like SDRs outside of calling every other work can an AI do. But then you use that time to make as much of an effort. I think that is what an AI SDR is. AI-SDR, AI enablement SDR, to make calls in the best possible way.
Yeah, main goal is to like have human conversations, right? Like so the more time you can spend on just having those conversations and not worry about anything else is what you should strive towards. To your point of updating files, right? Like now the natural progression to that is essentially having self-improving situations or like workflows where you are still interacting and doing your work, but whatever has to be learned from your work, actually goes back to the MD and then is done.
Yeah.
So that is exactly like how it is progressing, right? Like more and more of that improvement and a compounding exercise.
Yes.
Like your work should compound is the idea.
Yeah. So I think because generalist versus systems thinking, I should actually have a orchestrator on top, which is now learning from all of these three and the fourth and the fifth. And so it's learning from my writer skill every now and then. And then there is a master skill, which is learning from all these experiences. Okay. Just an understanding of how things are evolving.
Okay. A thing that I am doing, maybe going off topic slightly, a thing that I am doing is basically storing all of my replies and then that system learns from those replies. Like, but that reply tracking, traditionally, if you're using a CRM, would not be possible because CRM, like, is everyone storing all of the email that was sent and what was replied, even if it was a negative reply? Probably not, because CRMs are source of truth for a much more important piece of information. But just because you're not storing this reply information, it doesn't mean that it's not important. Maybe at a single person level, in a month, it's not as important. But if you have a complete picture of all of these replies in a 6-month time frame, then you can abstract away patterns from it. So same thing for personal work. I think actually Karpati was the one who initiated this entire idea conversation recently, is about like how these systems can actually compound and self-learn. And that's where like basically things are exponentially becoming better. Like from 24, from that chat UI, these systems which are essentially taking more and more of your mundane or work that you should not ideally dedicate your time.
No, I think the system is learning. Like my orchestrator is basically Claude NCP, and it's connected to Clay. It's connected to instantly. It's connected to this. So at one point, it was telling me that this subject line worked better. Why are we deviating? And I was like, let me try something. I know this worked, but that's the part. No, like you cannot keep continuing this subject line, this personalization work. So we continue doing this. We have to experiment. So it has,
that's where the judgment comes in.
Yeah. It's like, yes, this worked, but now we are trying something else. If not anything, are you sure? I'm like, yes, I'm sure. Let me try that experiment, because otherwise the system will not learn itself. So now a new set of experiments, a new set of 2 weeks of new data. Okay, now what have we learned from, like, let's say just a small thing as a subject line creation. So it's a very evolving system. And you think about it that things have become much easier. But if you are in that zone that AI is going to do everything for you, you will have a very quick uptime, but a very, very flat plateau of like bad work is what I think, because you have to invest more and more time into making sure that your PRRs, your everything has to be like that compounding. Just moving to a topic, which is again a very common point of discussion these days, and you have a lot more exposure on the GTM side of it, which is agency versus SaaS. Why do GTM or GTM engineering agencies exist at all? I have a theory, like, because SaaS tools are too like hard for companies to run themselves, maybe because of the complexity of the tool or the complexity of maybe talent for now. But I think agencies sell outcomes. That's my hypothesis. And I just wanted to understand what's your view on that. If the gap is closing or the gap is becoming bigger.
Yes. I agree with you. The agencies can deliver outcomes faster is one thing, and can end up owning that entire cycle to get there, versus like internally sometimes we'll have to figure a lot of things out, like who's the right talent, how do they work across all of these things. They have to like basically learn then and go out to deliver those outcomes much faster. So one is like velocity is why like GTM engineering agencies are still winning. Second, like you spoke about, is like they own the outcome. So you know like what you're getting in exchange of whatever monetary value. Third is basically their ability, like we spoke about, to stay on top of things. Like those are the three things exactly that we covered earlier, is why I would say that agencies will still exist. Now, how the agencies are changing in the nature, I have like a view on it that essentially only the larger ones are actually doing really well. That really large agencies who have existed for a really long time, they now have a lot more interest from these new AI native companies, because they have to go somewhere to like speed up their entire motion, right? And gain early traction, which is much more important for AI native companies to get. Otherwise, like if you don't get multiples of the traction that traditional SaaS got, you're not dead in the water.
Yeah.
So that way the older ones are doing great. And then like these boutique ones, which are like now can do a lot more with very less number of people, are doing really well. People who are in between, right? Like a lot of employees to do the work, the
people-centric ones.
People-centric, but in the middle, not really big, does not have like a lot of brand value, are actually in a slightly tricky position, I would say. But the boutique ones are doing really well. The traditional ones are doing really well.
All of us use Clay, and Clay has been like our orchestrator for a very long time. And I think it's also one of the most innovative companies, and you have a very close seat to that. They launched audiences very recently, and they also killed the role limit altogether just in the last few months as well. From a positioning perspective, they say that they are no more in data enrichment product, which is how they started, but now a GTM infrastructure company. And while they changed the pricing, which is based on number of actions as well as the number of credits that you're using, the pricing changed. And even in the new pricing model, while there was a lot of noise about, and I was personally not so happy about the pricing change as well, but they still made 100 million ARR with the new pricing. My question is like, if a company like Clay, which is becoming more from just a tool to your entire infrastructure layer, do we still need agencies in the first place?
Yeah, I feel like Clay themselves are a big believer of this, that they enable people to do more creative work. Even if you saw their ads last year during their first conference, a lot of those boards were around art had Michelangelo, I think, and now GTM has Clay. So the idea is that they facilitate that creative work. So I don't think so that, at least to me, they've ever made me feel as an operator that I am supposed to offload my work to Clay as a tool. What it has always felt like is now I have so much access, even in terms of integration or the ability to run those GTM workflows, that I can do a lot more creative work that I was not able to do earlier because like everything was disjointed. Right? Like if you have to source some data, like even some data as difficult as I saw like one person building a campaign around. So selling solar panels. So what they were able to do is essentially source satellite images to say that for this roof, what would be the potential if you ended up installing solar panels? Now, this kind of information, if it was not for like these modern orchestrators like Clay or something else, where you can integrate that API and get that data and then use it for relevancy personalization, then you would not have been able to do it. So I still feel like they are enabling that creative work and not subsuming it. So as long as that is the case, you still need a creative person. Think about these ideas that this is what I want to run as an experiment or as a campaign. Right? And that actually is really possible now using all of these tools. That's my thought around it, which is very different from AI SDR thing. That I feel like is trying to subsume the work.
Then in this model of Clay, you have access to a lot more options now. That how could you go about finding just people? So till you become the integration layer between everything, that's where you win, rather than just trying to replace everything. And I am the source of truth, but till you are open to being integrations to every kind of data, to every kind of orchestration. And I think they are very much okay that if orchestration is happening at a codex level or at a MCP level,
Right.
but you still are you still are everything between that. So I now have a fair understanding of that thing.
Is what, in some sense, like that is what we get to. Like in all these conversations, it's about like either people call it taste or judgment or discretion. So that still has to reside with somebody who has in-depth understanding. Why AI SDR, for example, doesn't work that well is because you're offloading that process of the AI making that judgment that what will be the right messaging. Now, it can't have as in-depth understanding of your own ICP as you do as a product. So that's why like I feel like I'm much more closer to the Clay school of thought of things. Where you get to like still run things on your own.
Coming to something that is recently happening, and there's something that we've been touching, which is Kiln getting acquired. So is that the ceiling for an agency is to get acquired? Or do you see there is more to it than what someone like an outsider like me, because there are hundreds of Clay agencies out there, and if the biggest one of them is getting acquired, what impression does it create for someone who is in deep trenches in that ecosystem?
Yeah, I feel like it's a very positive outcome for the entire space, and especially like given how long they ran for. Like they started and they're still like operating. I think they got acquired, but it's still running. So how fast that happened, the journey is the most interesting part of it. An acquisition as a path probably did not exist as much for agencies. Right?
Before,
So more than it being a ceiling, I think of it like as an alternate path that has opened up, which was not easily accessible. And almost like 3 acquisitions for Clay agencies have happened till date. And it has become like one of the things that was not even available to being a real option. Like you could have scaled your agencies to 7 or 8 figures. Maybe like that was a goal for most agency operators. But now there is like a real path to getting acquired, which is great. Essentially,
I also remember HubSpot acquiring a few agencies as well.
Did it? Oh, I think like Rev Partners got acquired. I forget who acquired it. But there's another one as well. But it's a completely new path.
Which you actually never thought, because when you think about agencies, you never think about like BPE could be a way, selling it off could be a way, but traditional acquisition to and being more close to the product that you were built on. I think it's a more promising than any other thing that have existed for agencies in the past. Now coming to, I think, the moat of actually my last conversation, we are in the outcome economy era, which is outcome-based services, tech-enabled services in however shape, form, whatever it is, be it traditional typical SaaS that we have seen in the last decade or so, because people want result. We work together. You've been on both sides. What's your view on, I keep saying it, death of SaaS or rebirth of SaaS, whatever. How do you see like this entire outcome economy? Is it just a phase? Is it like a true rebirth? But personally, I think buyers' tastes have changed enough, because I don't think it can still go back to what it was. But what's your view on this?
Right. I feel like it's very real. It's here to stay. But a lot of it, where it has actually manifested, is on the professional services side of things. Right? So accounting, if you look at, or if you look at, I don't know, legal work, whatever was professional services, like opting for a tool there versus like just actually getting an outcome, there it has become much more real versus like a lot of other commoditized software. What I'm trying to get to is there is still like a space for SaaS to exist and these AI native companies which deliver outcome much more closer to being service oriented. Both of them can exist is what I'm trying to get to. Like even if you think about like one of these AI native companies like OpenRouter gives you access to multiple models, you can use it. Or for that matter, if you think about Exa, you can use that to research. Right? Like what is the outcome there? The outcome is like the research that you get using this AI tool from a web search. But still like it's closer to SaaS than like an outcome driven product, right? So the outcome driven product, the real argument is essentially in the professional services side of things, where actually now paying for, I don't know, hours, you can get like the contract actually, which is done, right? Or like similar to accounting, like rather than paying
for the input, you're paying for the output. Yeah.
So that's much more real is what I would say.
And what's your view on the pricing of SaaS going from seats to outcome? Like, what do you think of that?
Usage-based pricing.
Yes.
I feel like it makes a lot of sense, especially like wherever inferences are tied, like you're using some model at the end of the day. It's very difficult. Let me say that. Like if you are using essentially models that any which way the most competent models are by these big labs, like OpenAI, Claude, those are the ones that you can use. There is no point in building your own models as people are realizing because you can't just beat that amount of competency by these big labs. So if that is the case, if you're using models at the end of the day to power your product, the output should be closer to like a credit-based pricing, right? Because any kind of abstraction to not do that, like let me subsume the cost and then figure out a way to do still seat-based pricing and whatnot, doesn't make sense. That is why I feel like because one, people are now much more aware of using these models. They're aware of credit-based pricing. They're aware of usage-based pricing. Yeah. So now that translating into actual AI native products is also easier because earlier people did not understand. Like what are these credits? What are these usage? A lot of that was a difficult thing.
I'll just talk something from experience and being from a customer success perspective. I've been part of those. Earlier, we used to have customers when you had like SaaS-based pricing customers. You have customers, and then you had drove them by adoption. You had an adoption metric on customer. Right. Yeah, you used to customer health score and all of that, and then you had the power users. Sell the same seats to your seat pricing almost had the same range for all the customers when you sold it to them. And then you had a team whose job was to drive adoption, and you just killed so that you can renew them. You can just renew them for next year because they are not using and adopting it for whatever reason. And then you had the power users, and where you could have wished, I sold them at this, but they are just choosing out the product so well. Why not all customers are like this? You had that, but why can't I make more money? I think it is also solved for the company because if that low adoption person, if they're using less, they are giving you less and you have, the risk is less. You don't have to worry about that. If they use, they'll pay more. If they don't use, don't pay. Plus the upside is better. So if you have a good product, which has a good adoption, so your green customer, your power user customers are actually going to make you more revenue that you will stop worrying about those, red customer because of a data adoption. If I were a traditional SaaS, not so AI native, I would still be very, very happy with it that I now have to don't worry about my book. Because whoever is using, whether it's 10 users in one company or one user across 10 company, I'm going to make that money because my margin is now not based on seats and I don't have to throw people and send gifts and this and that and educate. If they see value after till a point and they still continue to use it, which we have found the value in the product because they're using it for an outcome, I believe it's very good. I think most founders should think this way. Maybe I'm not understanding some unique economics here, but I think it's a good thing even for traditional style.
Yeah, I think so too. But I feel like still in some places, the seed-based pricing, like especially Salesforce is like seed-based, right? Yeah. And then there is outreach, which is all of these power dialers, right? So sometimes I feel like that argument that we make that, okay, usage-based pricing to outcomes is easier for a lot more for AI rather than a traditional SaaS in some cases.
So we were discussing, like we use Riverside. Riverside has no cap. Instantly has no cap. It's simple license-based pricing,
Right.
depending on what kind of buyer I am. Right now, it's hurting me that I edit very little on Riverside, but I'm still paying the same price. But if instantly made usage-based pricing, my bills would have gone left, right, and center, because I take one seat and some credits, and my work is done per client or for that user. The amount of outcomes I'm driving from instantly is a lot more valuable to me for the pricing that I am paying. So it's also it's a double-edged sword for both the buyer. Like, it's hurting me for Riverside because I don't use it as often as that, but instantly I spend like shit ton of hours, whether in an MCP context or in a UI context. So I think it's still open for debate, and it's still an evolving ecosystem is what I would say. Yeah. So there is this notion, and I think you talked about it. It is around the UI part of it, like whether are you constrained by UI or not. The world, I would still say, has a UI, but it's a different UI for different use cases. Some people run it on MCP, some people run it on chat, some people run it on a case cutter. It's all being very integrated. What is the role of UI anymore, or is it all about just being integration and data sharing between platforms? I would say.
Right. How I look at it is like, if you believe in the hypothesis that the world is moving towards more agent interactions, then it is important for your product to have one way to facilitate that. So all of the headless workflow, right? I mean, if you use an API, for example, or an MCP or a CLI, and that can integrate and you can work directly use the product, let's say inside of your coding agent like Cloud Code Codex, then that unlocks a part of the process, because there is like a difference in what UI allows versus all of these coding agents allow in terms of operations. And UI by itself is like somewhat limited, right? And power users, especially, that is what you would see a lot more people moving towards orchestrators like Cloud Code and Codex a lot more with power users. That is true with even with Clay, right? Now they have their MCP that you can directly use inside of these coding agents. But there are also drawbacks. So there is in this large shift that is happening where people want to do more and more work through their agents, which function much better through these gateways of API, MCP, CLI. You can do a lot more, but the drawbacks are also very evidently clear because people are now lacking auditability. So in an interface, if you're using Clay, you can see like 50,000 rows. You can see like click through and see what happened with what data. But if you do not know what you're doing using a coding agent and orchestrating workflows, it's easy to miss that. And that is what people actually that I have spoken with and who are using this on their daily workflows, even me included, I am also feeling the pinch of it that I can't look through things as easily. And people who are not power users, especially for them, it is really difficult if you make them jump from, let's say, like an interface where they can see things and audit or even verify, from that to directly something which is like a terminal. So that becomes really difficult. So how do you balance this almost, right? Like now there is like this concept which probably will emerge. It's like UI on demand. That what if you're using an app like Codex and you can create
like a preview, like a preview.
Possible, right?
Yeah. So no, I agree to you. Like sometimes I get frustrated with the MCP Clay thing. I'm like, boss, give me the CSV. Let me see what is happening. Let me look at it, because something's off. Because if I give the full autonomy, I would like to believe that everything is perfect. But when I see the outcome, because I do not know at which part of it is broken. So I would rather, at some point where I'm getting that doubt in my head, I was like, take a pause here and let me go and check what is happening, because somewhere something is not right, which is more evident in UI. I think UI on demand is actually pretty good.
Big thing is collaboration. So one is auditability and verifiability taking a hit, which is more difficult, and you have to solve for use cases like open the CSV at the right time in my workflow when I use the skill so that I can audit, and then we move to the next step. You can build those things in and you can customize it according to you. This is what I have done essentially. But the other part is collaboration. Now, how do you collaborate? Imagine like writing a contract. If you're using a coding agent which has a skill of how to review and whatnot, it can do that. But you're not always operating and reviewing a contract or writing a contract in isolation. You're actually working with somebody, the opposing counsel, or your team members to add the comment that you can review. How do you do that? Like even if you generate a contract with all of the review and whatnot, somebody else needs to view it together in probably like an editor, if you remember in SpotDraft, right? So that part of the interface is not solved. That's why there is still need of the UI, but for a lot of it has to branch out and then it has to converge. So all of that has to be figured out, but I do feel like it will become less and less important, but it still has a very significant role to play in some of these focal points like collaboration and verifiability.
No, I'll just agree to it. Like my entire orchestration happens at MCP level. Like if I started creating CSVs and sheets, I wouldn't even find what data is in what place. So what I've started doing is after a particular stage, I start pushing data to Notion. So Notion basically is not my typical CRM because orchestration is still happening at MCP, because picking up the email, the fields, throwing it to instantly, taking the data from Fable, all of that. Notion has just become the interface to give people a sense, the stages of the work. The stages of the work. This is where we have reached. If someone wants to see, okay, where are we? Right. How many emails have we sent? Who has opened? Who has clicked? Because everything is happening. So Notion has just become my UI, like a page or dashboard, which could easily have been something else. Like for some cases, I've started getting Claude artifact who do not have Notion access, where there's a table maintained to be shared with people to just get a sense of how many emails have we sent, who has opened, who is engaged, who is not engaged. Yeah. Which is something like a Claude artifact I created just to create a dashboard, because I can see and understand data between Claude chats, and obviously it's my login, so no one else can access. So I would like to think that my Claude artifact was the UI on demand, which I could share with other people to be audited, get a sense of what is happening where, and I could also see, like, because in MCP, if you say like, show me the openers, a huge table opens, I need to filter, sort, and I'm not going to do that within an MCP. Like I need a better place or I need a table view. Maybe because I'm an old person, I've seen enough UIs in the last decade. So I am more comfortable seeing a sort, a table view where I can click open, filter, and I can see all opens in one place. So it's a very interesting play altogether.
Yeah, even in that, I would say there are two sets, right? Like one, the UI on demand that you spoke about, it's for consumption of somebody.
Yeah.
So they need to consume that information, and that is your way of delivering that information to them. But what about the fact when you have to collaborate on a piece of, you call it artifact or document or whatever, where you're adding comments? I feel like that part of the process is still like a lot more unanswered. And the second thing is that I was going to say is like tables is very interesting because I keep talking to Anil, I was covering him, and like my point was also that why does it happen that whenever in whatever form of application you have to deal with a large amount of data, every time it ends up becoming a table.
Yes.
So that has somehow like humanity has found their
Excel, Google Sheets, and obviously from a very human perspective, notebooks with lines. We are just used to the idea of seeing data in a table with rows in a tabular format. Human brain, maybe in the next generation which comes, they are more comfortable seeing things in a terminal. But even for
link in place.
Yeah, for me, when I need to see large amounts of data to make sense, I want a table, whether it's in a Notion. Yeah, clear tables, like it's always better to push a table.
Easy starting point because you're already familiar with that format.
Yeah.
And you have to work with a lot of data. Tables are necessary.
Yeah. Okay. So now I'm going to talk about something which is a little advanced even for myself, but because you are the right person to do so. Like my blunt question is, does every serious operator, and that's true for myself, do I need to learn coding? Because now a lot of tools, if I have to set up some background, you went from Clay Workflows to Claude Code and you integrated both of them. You created your own MCP server. Clay, actually what they did is they now have a natural language. They have the Sculptor, which I think I have used multiple times. So where is it all progressing? Do I need to learn codecs, need to think of my own servers, or should I be relaxed in a point that if I understand the systems and the logic correctly, I will still be able to arrive at the same output irrespective of not so technical depth?
That's a good question. I would say that obviously there are advantages, and this is me talking to myself more than answering this question, is if I knew how to code, it's always like basically you are limited by your learning at any given point of time. Right? Like if you understand things to a more first principle level or like to more depth, you can get more juice out of the system. So because I had that product manager interface in the technical world, I was able to get somewhat more in comparison through these coding agents and whatnot.
So someone like me, like as simple.
Yeah, anybody, like somebody from like a non-technical background to me being like almost semi-technical. And I am sure like somebody like Anirudh, who is like an engineer,
proper engineer,
that he can get like even further out of these systems, because the CAF becomes your ability to understand and like at the end of the day guide. That although is reducing a lot for some work, you don't even need to have that because a lot more can be offloaded. So where does that boundary lie is to be figured out. That is not to say that there is no benefit of knowing coding. There is definitely some benefit. But for most part, you can actually get away with a lot is what I'm trying to get. Even if you do not know how to code, as long as you understand what is happening. And like my way of like doing that has become that when I'm operating in Claude Code, there's like a learning mode. Right? Okay. You can shift to your learning mode and then it delivers you insight. A thing that started happening with me was a lot more learning in terms of building was being eaten up by the coding agent, by Claude Code. So I took a step back and I stopped doing like, okay, then just these skip permissions and started being much more hands-on. so that I can read, like in the learning mode, even if I'm telling it to do something, as it does that thing, it tells me what happened. So I feel like it is really important to stay on top of these things if you're unfamiliar. If you know like how you like to review the code or like generate the code, then you probably can be more hands-off, right?
Yeah.
But if you're not aware of something while you're building it, even though the coding agent can do that work, you should try more and more to learn those things, because it will keep unlocking like different levels of how you can use the system, is what I believe in. But if I were to like give you like a one-liner to your answer, I feel you can get away with like a lot more now in this world without even knowing how to code.
Yeah. Oh, makes sense that if I had that understanding, I could go deep and understand a little bit more, but I am limited by what I know and how much I can do. I've been telling myself that maybe I don't need to do quad code and MCP is good enough for me, but definitely if I go there, I'll learn something and maybe get more outcomes, maybe not. But the limitation is not the platform, it's maybe my.
Yeah, because I ended up doing like a course in JavaScript just so that I can understand. I had no utility of it as such. But just out of curiosity, I feel like that plays a huge role. And although even if you do not know how to code and you can offload your work to whatever orchestrator you're using, my default is to be more hands-on and learn. Because if once you like what happens like if you offload your learning, even though you don't know what it's doing and like you're able to get to something, then what about the interim process of like what you could have learned so that you can build on top of it?
Yeah.
Is how I think about it, more for myself than anybody else.
So I white coded a tool, a functioning tool, which is hosted and all on the works. I was whiteboarding on how I would rebuild this system. And I started thinking from a product first principles, like blogs, architects, inputs, engines, and all of that. The first time I was very excited just by the idea that I could actually build something, and I built it, took it live, got a few users as well. It's a dormant tool right now. I did no promotions for it. Towards the second half of the year, I'll build again and launch it. Now that I think about it, maybe I need to go into a little bit more depth on understanding the vulnerabilities, because that time I was a novice and got excited by AI. Now I do not take what AI is saying, whether on Cloud Code, and that would be on Replit as well. So this is a part that's interesting to me, and I'll just put it this way. Fable 5 was amazing, is amazing. But what just happened just left a very sour taste in my mouth, and it also like gave us some mirror as Indians. Honestly, the amount of access to technology that we had, I never thought that something like this could happen, which is beyond the ecosystem's control. I saw someone suing Anthropic or department or someone that because of access to model, they were losing customers, or because of non-preferential treatment, they were losing customers. So for me, just a very simple operator, just by not having access was making me sad. But what is your view on what all happened with Fable 5 access? And second, is access to frontier models or access to technology the key rather than anything else going forward?
Yeah, I think one learning is like things are volatile. And the other learning is you should build systems which are resilient. So on the first day that Fable came out, when it originally came out, I ended up using it for 2 of my workflows that I had. But I built it in a way that it could easily switch back to Opus.
Yeah.
So as long as you have that modularity built into the system and you're not solely rely on one provider, then you will be in a good place. Like some LLMs will exist. We are in a place where it's not like all of the LLMs will go away. So you build from a perspective of, even though you might take a hit on the quality for like the interim short time, but your systems won't fail. So the way to do that is building resilient systems with redundancy, that there is some backup.
Fallback, yeah.
The same thing applies because of the cold email audience, right? Like people who might end up watching this. Essentially infra. A lot of people, what they will do is like buy the inboxes and domains from the same provider. But the same thing applies there. Like don't put your eggs in one basket.
Yeah.
So if your inboxes end up, which happened multiple times, and like panels, entire Google panels ended up getting burned. So all your infra is burned. Like all providers who are using that is burned. So how do you overcome that? You have like multiple providers. You diversify. You rotate your inboxes. Same thing applies. Like you rotate your models. I was not as affected by it just because I had backup in place. And then as soon as it came back, it was like a one-line change for me. I changed it and then it was like.
Well, from a work perspective, nothing changed. It's just for the first time after ages, I felt like a differential treatment. That is something that I was not so happy with, which I think.
Differential treatment as in like it being accessible to some people, but not all people.
Yes.
I understand it on some level, but I also understand it from a private entity standpoint, right? Like it's their model, in which way it's subsidized. So in terms of having a say over what they're supposed to do, just because my economical ideas are more right leaning, because I don't feel very strongly about it, because I see it from a perspective that in which way it is subsidized. I'm more worried about actually what happens when this rug pull might happen in the future.
That's the
very good.
That's a very big worry. Like now we are so much addicted to it. Like our AI bills are gonna be like 5x not 10x like that. So we have to be mentally prepared. And if someone doesn't believe in that, they're living in a very delusional world. That because now everyone is so much addicted to AI, like the moment that subsidy is gone, we just gonna like, it's the Uber mechanism. Like we just got addicted to Uber, Swiggy and all of this thing. And now we don't realize how much money we actually spend on Swiggy without even realizing it. And every time we see the money, we just abuse everyone, but we still ended up buying it because we are not so much used to it.
Exactly. So that's actually a bigger worry for me.
Yeah.
But in terms of preference treatment, yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's a worrisome situation, but I like to worry less about it. Because
But let me put it in a different perspective. If you were an Indian company and you have a competitor in the US, that has a bigger impact. That's a business. Yeah.
But in my head, there is no answer to it. Like, because it's not like you can demand something out of that, right? Like, because you don't, it's not like they owe you something as such, because they're private entities. They have like whatever put their resources into building that.
Yeah.
So that's my take on it, but it's definitely a significantly worse situation to be in, because that is happening probably more and more now going forward.
No, that's like 100% agree on both counts. Like if I were building a company which is dependent on frontier, any kind of technology, and we are talking about AI, like it happens with like AWS being down. Now, if your entire infrastructure data is on AWS and your S3 is down, like gone, like you were gonna do it. So play it safe.
Yeah, I think the options are essentially what as is like the wisdom going around, that you build for your either sovereign models or you have like open source alternatives. But the problem is whenever I try to use those, it's such a big difference that I feel like it's hopeful right now. And it is the right thing to think about, but I don't see like when that will happen, that when all of these open source models, sovereign models will catch up.
Even the delta between Anthropic and OpenAI is significant, and the delta between these two and everyone else is
so much. Like, how will it happen? Like, we can talk about like the right measures to maybe like at some point of time. The idea is that you would like to, everybody who's trying to maximize on knowledge work would like to have access to the best models.
Yeah.
And the delta is, like you said, so much.
So we've talked a lot from a seller and a builder perspective. If you talk about from a buyer perspective, which is obviously all of us as GTM operators need to have a better understanding of how our buyers are operating. I'm 100% sure, even I know the cold emails that we are sending or anything that we are writing, it's being scanned by an AI first before it even actually is hitting someone's inbox. Because I have stopped responding to any email, any LinkedIn myself, whatever that may be.
Remind me to put you on my block list.
Anything like, anything. Like, so what's your view on the buyer's adoption on AI? As sellers, we have adopted so much. This entire podcast and my entire series is all about AI is changing selling. But what's your view, maybe just as an independent buyer, individual buyer, or in general, what we are seeing with buyer behavior changing with AI adoption?
Buyer behavior changing in terms of AI adoption, you mean to say them basically making purchasing decisions for something?
Yeah.
That's actually like, for AI native companies, it's a lot more positive because people are much more ready to pay for AI products. Right? Like, don't you think so? Because what happened in traditional SaaS is for the long, so you'll have a free tier, right? Like they will do like a free trial. Then at some point of time, they will convert into like a paid user. A lot of drop off over there. But with AI native companies, people tend to like shell out money a lot more is what I think.
So then you think if there is an overlap of a need and overlap of a good product, you are actually better suited now than before.
100%. That's why like you see AI native companies, one, getting money much sooner and growing exponentially more than traditional SaaS. Because these two buyer behavior is actually changed towards more positive. As long as they have a need, they're much more likely to pay and more people are likely to pay.
Much more likely to try faster than traditional SaaS.
100%.
Yeah.
And also like for that trial, they're ready to pay is what I'm saying.
Yes.
Like earlier, getting that dollar amount might be like multiple people have multiple AI subscriptions, like ChatGPT also, Claude also.
They're always ready to try if you have a need for something. Yes. Very small, like lastly, small things compound and it's your line. Like not your every workflow is a life-changing thing. What are some of those smaller things from a GTM and GTM engineering perspective that will actually compound going forward? Like if you want to share something, maybe personal or maybe general.
Yeah, I think, that when I wrote that, what I wanted to say was give a starting point to people who might not be using AI in their workflows a lot more. And even though like we are in this space where it feels like everybody's using AI, but I do know, if you just look at the stats, right? Number of people using AI for coding, it's like still so less. Like even in terms of like weekly active users of ChatGPT, you'll see that's why like they don't publish like DA use. It's not a lot of people using AI, although it might seem like it. So my post was written from a perspective of people who are thinking of like, how do I try this out for the first time? And then there is like so much noise that you have to like basically append your entire motion use AI. For them, I feel like the easiest starting point is twofold. Either you think about like what interests you. Either it might have been like a micro SaaS or like a landing page, or it might have been like a daily health tracker, calorie tracker, like a travel planner, whatever it might be. something of interest, or it could be the second thing is something that is requiring a lot of manual effort in your professional daily life. Those are the two starting points. So it does not have to be such a shiny thing for you to try out. Just think of like something really small to start off with. And then automatically, once you try it out, like there is no going back.
I want to touch upon a part which I think it's every converges the story, which is GTM engineering as a whole. So why does GTM engineering exist inside and outside? If I were to share my perspective, is it's a shift in how things can be done versus how things are actually done. And then there are a few early adopters who have taken that part. If I would just, if you would just elaborate on why GTM engineer as a as a role, as a term should exist or is existing today.
Yeah, my take on that is the inception of this role comes from Clay. Clay first time coined this role, GTM engineering, then it blew up. For you to understand like what GTM engineer role comprises of, you have to also understand like what Clay was when they started. Right? So Clay started as the first tool essentially which let you bring all of the GTM workflows together. So you had LDRs, MREs, building lists. Somebody was enriching lists somewhere. Somebody was writing the copy somewhere else, probably using merge tags. Somebody was basically like setting up a sequencer and your email infra. All of this was all over the place. And then everything using Clay, you could orchestrate in one place. So this was so new from the traditional, like you said, as like a stark contrast between what was possible, now what is possible, that people who ended up catching up to like the new way of doing things had ended up developing like a core skill set, which was very new and which was also very closely coupled with all of these new GTM tools. You also had to know like one of the best things about Kiln that I like, and I'm one of the probably like in some decimal percentage power user of Clay Agent. So Clay Agent was their tool, right? So when you have to use Clay Agent inside of Clay, not only you need to have an understanding of how to do multiple things across the workflow, but also how to prompt, how to basically store the right context, how to navigate that agent into the right direction. So it ended up becoming so different for traditional work that it needed almost a tag for itself because the skill set was unique and it was real. Now, where does the skill set fit into the different roles or functions that existed? People are still trying to figure out, right? Where it sits under the sales team, the growth team, the RevOps team, all of those, there are like different opinions around it. But the role more than not has solidified itself because the skill set is new, it's real, and it is delivering impact. So those are my thoughts in terms of how the engineering role has evolved. And right now, where it is at almost.
Fair point. And thank you for like actually clearing it because no offense to anyone, I don't think like RevOps manager rewriting the title as GTM engineer is the right way to go about it. Both have very, very different skill sets. I would 100% agree. I don't think the version of RevOps that we remember is the same as what a GTM engineer is. Very blunt question. Does GTM engineers survive till 2027? What would its shape look like? If merged into RevOps, what would GTM engineer for the remainder of 2026 and 2027 look like? As simple as.
I think the role is when it started, it was a lot more, still is, I think, a lot more centered towards outbound side of things. So it was about either personalization or calling or personalized landing pages. Now it started branching out into where I feel like some of the differing opinions come in and why people from RevOps, maybe like their work is overlapping with GTM engineers, is like them interfacing a lot more with the CRM side of things and doing things like inbound and outbound. Like you have a website visitor, you can end up qualifying it, you can end up scoring it, then you can end up routing it to the right sequence. Or sometimes if you are in an enterprise oriented company, what you're doing is like probably email as a channel in which way is less effective. So what you're doing is you're facilitating some of the motions more, right? Like the event motion. What you're doing is you're building list of people in a certain area and calling them together, like a New York centered small dinner event that we want to do, right? So I see GTM engineers facilitating a lot more through this skill set of knowing new age tech and being able to run experiments and deliver results because of it. That is now foraying more and more into other parts. And one of my friends actually works at a company where the GTM engineering function actually sits with product. So it's a PRG motion. So a lot more effort by a GTM engineer can be actually very beneficial on the product-led growth side of things. So it's very interesting how this role is actually finding its place in different functions and evolving that way from being just a very outbound centered role to a lot more into having cross-functional impact through self-owned initiatives. Even though it might be working under RevOps, even if that is the case, a GTM engineer can own a lot more in terms of a role by itself than like basically delegation of work that was the case earlier.
Or like automating stuff more than
Automating stuff is one way to get it. For sure, there's a lot of automation. Yeah, I mean, it is a lot of
one thing I just keeps thinking, who in this modern AI world is the custodian of models and tokens? Is it the GTM engineering or so to say?
Not necessarily, because everybody should. My firm belief is that everybody in your organization, if we believe that LLMs or AI in general is a force multiplier of intelligence, then why would you not give access to that intelligence or that force multiplier to everyone? So I feel like they should not be the custodian, even though people would think that ideally they should be responsible in terms of contained enough large initiative and they can own everything in. But for other people and their work, I don't feel like that persona is the right fit. Probably like CRO is still the right fit of being a custodian over there. Rather than GTM engineers deciding token usage or all of those things, they might be able to help you make more informed decisions, but that should not be their final call to basically decide that by themselves.
And do you see, because this is the part you see, traditionally, RevOps has been a proactive role, which is something you have a need and then you get the RevOps guy who gets the job done the most efficient and the best way possible. That's how we have been operating. It's either a replacement or an enhancement or a second person, which is a GTM engineer. Is it reactive in which while the GTM engineer enabling other functions, which is the outbound, let's say, or the events team, or to do stuff more efficiently, more fastly? Or do you think like GTM engineering as a whole and as a person would have its own KPIs, initiatives?
I think own KPIs and growth metrics. More often than what happens is like if they're most GTM engineers are probably contributing to the outbound side of things, and the KPIs over there are fairly well defined. Right? Either you're like basically a pipeline. If you're on that, like if you're in the bucket of most GTM engineers who are closely contributed to outbound, then your KPIs, even though you might think that there might be like a better KPI for that role, but actually just beating book works very well, is what I would say. In terms of the persona being different from RevOps persona, you're right. Like actually, I remember like certain conversations. I feel like both these personas have the right place and both are required, but sometimes there is like a divergence. And that divergence is significant in terms of GTM engineers being able to run a lot more experimentation. So if the premise is that landscape is changing and organizations need to stay on top of that changing landscape, this persona is essentially the connecting bridge between the changing landscape and the GTM motions evolving. Yes. So this person is supposed to basically carry forward. The RevOps person is basically supposed to solidify your foundation.
It's the base.
Yeah, it's the base.
And this is the accelerator.
This is the accelerator, and the person is responsible for more experimentation and trying out new things so that you're always on top of things and are actually able to get the results out of it as well.
In an in-house setup, do you think the GTM engineer would having more say than the, let me say, the functional, the specialist? What I mean by that is the GTM engineer taking the final call on the copy versus the content writer, site copy or a blog copy than the content writer. So there's a specialist and you have the accelerator. Do you see at some point GTM engineering being independent?
Yeah, I feel like it should be much more contained, and that is the interesting thing about it. The idea that one single operator can own an end-to-end workflow to deliver still the outcome that you wanted out of multiple people. And that's why like it is able to do a lot more. And that's why like the comp or the salary that you see reflects for that role, right? Like in general, I feel like yes, they should be owning end to end any initiative that they're working on. Although sometimes if you have a great copywriter and they can basically contribute to make your campaigns much more successful, then why would you not utilize it? Like I do that a lot. But Henry, who's the head of Grow, he is like great when it comes to like copywriting, right? So it's easier for me to like get his inputs and like deliver results that way. But I feel like they should still have the competency of being able to do that if required. It should not be like an approval process or like a blocking process that you are dependent on somebody. But at the same time, if you can get more inputs, then why not? You should.
So in growing AI native companies of 2027, do you see more GTM engineers than specialists?
Like, does the GTM engineering role consolidate different other existing traditional roles?
Basically, if I am a new age, I'm thinking about my go-to-market setup. Should I think the traditional way, which is first I will get the specialists, which is your content, copy, and all of that? Would you rather not first hire a GTM engineer because the scale at which this person can operate and deliver more outcomes, more campaigns within the time period?
Yeah, I feel like it is important to talk about like what specialist roles it can probably consolidate. But I don't think so. Like content in itself is such a big role. Right? I don't think so that at the maybe like the contents work of copywriting for email copy that the GTM engineer can consolidate. But the other side, what about like all of the blog articles, right? Like what about like the other pieces of content that they're writing? GTM engineer is not the right person to overtake that. One way to think about the GTM engineer is like them being able to amplify everybody's effort. So if you have a great specialist, if they work in tandem with the GTM engineer, their efforts can be multiplied. Like even like we're talking about this, like AI optimized content. Right? Yeah. So if you have an idea of how to write great content, and there is like a new capability of amplifying that using what GTM engineers can build, then that is a great combination, is what I would say, rather than like them taking both the content role entirely. But like you spoke about like the LG and the list building side of things, right? That is completely now is gone. Yeah. It's like even like infra management, for example. That is a good example. A lot more different roles that existed now can just be like a GTM engineering role. But when it comes to specialists, when it comes to like content, ads, for that kind of thing, right? Like you still need to think about like what your ad copy
says that my broad NCP is running ads in the new.
Right. Nice.
LinkedIn says that you don't need anyone. All you need is something and I give you the playbook and you don't need to hire anything.
I have not received any of those.
I hit a comment and I saw the notion dogs and I just then I bookmarked one or two and then I deleted it.
I feel like specialists actually any human output. If it is centric human output, right? Like content is so human centered. You can tell easily, and like a storytelling or a narrative by human is so different. That is even more difficult.
Design.
Yeah.
The experience of something you can talk. Like I made a post about it and people are still very differentiated opinion. Like how do you feel about AI design? Like the sign is a very favorite design font. There's a lot of design like AI uses. That's why I also used it and then I moved back to Sans because Sans is a family which is a readable family. It's very readable for.
I thought Comic Sans was the most hated.
Yeah, because Comic Sans is like a play on Sans because Sans is like the most used readable perspective. So Sans is like a very human piece of thing. And then you have these sharp, edgy AI first fonts. Sign is one of them, SYNE, and then the purple and the blue and all of that. So there was a huge rise of AI first designs, and then Hollywood like fuck no. The moment I see an AI design, I am not trusting this. Like it happened so fast. Hey, you are AI first, and then you'll fuck AI. It happened, especially when design, it happened so fast. I'll just give you an example. If you go and open in Strike, you'll start seeing more human images. So design is something obviously which AI cannot absorb because it's an experience. So you cannot train AI on design very subjective. I tried so many times. You can train AI on design language, but you cannot train AI of design because it's so subjective and it changes with culture, it changes with region, it changes with upbringing, it changes with what you're seeing around you and all of. If you ask AI, what should I wear for a podcast? It will never get these colors. It will never ever get these colors because it's a personality rule. Like so, design is one of those things. I don't think it's gonna get to them because AI is built on data all over the internet, which aggregates it to like the mathematical functions takes it down, like, and humans have a spectrum, like, everyone knows about your Clay finalist championship thing. Walk us through that journey, how that happened, how was the entire thing?
So it was the first time that it was happening, the Clay championship, and I had been building for some time using Clay. They have a Slack community. I was hanging out there for like hours. Most of my work day was spent there. And I learned it by myself. So I was learning, I was answering questions for multiple people. I already had a fair idea of what I can build and not. And then this ended up happening, like they called, hey, if you want to participate, then this is what you have to do. And at that point of time, I was already slightly involved in the Clay community, which had just started in Bangalore. I think 1 or 2 events had happened at that point of time. So being involved in terms of work and community, it made sense for me. I was like excited to apply. The ability to like go head to head, so many awesome people, right? I ended up making a lot of friends through this entire process as well. Find that competitive side of things, so being able to go head to head with anybody who is probably a Clay expert. Then the second thing is I always like building. And through that, with that time pressure, I actually got through a lot more than I would have otherwise, just because there was a pressure of like, okay, you have to build in 20 minutes, right? To prep for that, or like to speed up my process of building things in that 20-minute round where everybody's competing and you had to clean up an entire list of CRM, rank people, say what the outreach is going to be. That things that would take you probably like a week if I were to sit down and normally do it, right? That time pressure of competing, I was able to build it in like, let's say 20 minutes. So that was really fun. Like, essentially that experience of under pressure, building and then working across the group.
I'm really proud of you just as an India, just I know you and just
I appreciate it.
yeah. But there must be some sense of pride in it that you run a full region. You're one of the 4 people in the entire world on this. Like, it's like, how does that feel?
That's pretty amazing. I mean, yeah, Clay was generous enough to fly us all out, all 4 of us, to San Fran. And I really like going there. I think it's a beautiful city. Meeting people there, even though I ended up not making the finals. But that experience, it was in person. So it was a large hall where we had to sit down, imagine, on a stage with 4 laptops. And then in person, everybody's watching. It was like one of those e-games, almost like that, right? And then making it till there and then meeting all of these people, I would say like definitely there was some essence of achievement that, okay, I ended up making till here. So that I was really glad of.
I think a lot of people actually made videos of reviewing your work. The contestants were what's good, what's bad. I was just doing this research for this podcast. I'm really happy that this was happening. It does give me just because I know there is some sense of pride in everyone by Kamal Shah being WhatsApp CEO.
That's too much, Akash.
Like, it's just I made a video about it. It's just that one of ours. It's not like
yeah, just because I okay, there's promotion there.
Yeah, no, I was really like I know this guy. Really happy and super proud that you are, and I'm really happy for you that did that. If I just do a very quick rapid fire, then first, the one line of advice you have for each function at this point. Don't have to be politically correct. Yeah. A. Oh my. This is okay. Content writer.
Don't use it.
Events people.
2 more events.
Head of marketing.
Run less ads.
Okay. Early stage CEO.
Top POS.
Mid market CEO.
Stop pivoting.
This is great fun. Head of RevOps mid market.
Not time yet to cost optimize.
People on the fence of still not trying it. The people who are posting on LinkedIn to comment X1 to
block them.
Yeah. Founders who find posts where everything can be done by AI and forwarded psychosis. AI psychosis, very good word. So this was great fun. Thank you for doing the rapid fire. Everyone's inspiration is off with Karan. But
where is my hamper?
Yeah, it's there. This is the camera cannot see. So first of all, Katie, Kushagra, really appreciate doing this. There's a lot of noise on the internet, and that was like always my thought that to get these things out, whether or not a human listens it to, and I'm pretty sure at some point an AI will index it, and so it gets found. I'll make sure that it gets indexed in AI so that a lot of correct people see it. But really, thank you for doing this.
Of course. No, I just wanted to say to you, thanks for having me. It was pretty fun. I really like talking about all these because it's an interesting area nonetheless. And also a good excuse to catch up with you after a really long Really fun.
4-5 minutes, yeah. So hey, folks, this is Katie Kushagra Tiwari. A lot of accolades that we've already discussed, so let's not go there. But thank you for joining us. This is Katie, this is Akash, and this is GTM and AI Operators Show. Do subscribe, do share, and see you in the next video.